Okay, you're live. Have fun.
Thanks. All right. Guess what it is? We're back on another Thursday. So my favorite people, we've had this talk. They're not my only favorite people. They just happen to be my recurring favorite people.
You're live. Have fun.
And so, oh, I should probably mute the YouTube. You heard nothing. Okay. So we're back to another Terraform Community Office Hours with the absolutely fabulous Plugin SDK team. I am Tracy Holmes. You all should know that by now. Tracy B. Holmes across the board. She, her. Before I let my wonderful guests introduce themselves again, I will go through what we always go through. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to interact with us in the chat. We love questions. Ask us things that they don't know. That's the whole game. It's like, let's make it a game. When you do that, make sure you're being considerate, you're being kind, and you're being professional. TLDR, don't say anything that you don't want anybody saying to you. Let's just have fun. Can we do that? Okay. So I'm going to let Katie and Patty introduce themselves. And today, I don't have to drive because Katie's going to do all the jumping on Patty and making him answer things. So give me questions to ask, and I'm letting it go.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, I'm Katie Moe. I am a software engineer on the Terraform Plugin SDK team. And this is...
Oh, that's my cue. Hi, I'm Patty. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the engineering lead for the Terraform Plugin SDK team.
Wonderful. Yeah. So as Tracy mentioned, I'm going to be driving today, but I'm going to be interviewing Paddy on some of the fun questions here. So I had to keep Paddy on his toes here. Yeah. Welcome to our little fireside chat. I want to say that today is my second year anniversary at HashiCorp. I am absolutely delighted to be here. When I joined HashiCorp, I joined in the enablement team. We did not yet have an SDK team because we didn't have an SDK. So the first job of this team was to take the SDK out of Terraform Core, extract it, which wasn't the cleanest job you could imagine. It had some complications. We did a great job extracting the SDK, releasing version 1 of the SDK, releasing version 2 of the SDK, and now we're here working on the new version of whatever post SDK v2 framework development looks like. So we got some exciting news today. As you probably saw yesterday, Terraform 0.15 was released yesterday. So we would love to take credit for all of that. Unfortunately, we cannot take credit for that much. We can take credit for fixing some of the bugs or spotting some of the bugs. But the main thing that you need to be aware of as a provider developer is that if you want your acceptance test to run properly under Terraform 0.15, you need to be on the latest version of SDK v2. So that's SDK v2.4.3. So we released that a while ago just to make sure that you could test against Terraform 0.15, which I'm sure lots of you have been doing already. So the SDK itself, we don't expect any provider issues with 0.15. Obviously, we've been testing Terraform 0.15 against lots of providers. But if you want your acceptance test to run, you will need to be on the latest version of the SDK. So there are a couple more things we want to talk to you about today before we take some questions. The first one we'll talk about is Terraform Protocol V6, which is super exciting. We'll then give you an update on Terraform Plugin Go, our new library, Terraform Plugin Log, and then a kind of general update on where we are in developing what we're calling the HCL2 native framework. So firstly, Terraform Protocol V6. So the Terraform protocol, as you are probably aware, is the way that Terraform providers and Terraform Core communicate with each other over gRPC. And we've had this Terraform Protocol V5 for some time. We had not initially planned to make a V6, which was some big kind of breaking release to the protocol, but it turned out that in solving a problem that's been a long-standing problem in Terraform, we ended up developing a V6, and we thought that now was a good opportunity to release that. So now I'm going to hand over to Paddy to actually explain to you what this is about. You're up here, right, aren't you? Yeah, or here.
In the void somewhere. I think, let's see, you're in London. I don't actually know what latitude London is on versus Washington State. So I don't know what direction I physically am in relation to you. But yeah, so the Terraform protocol, we do have version 6 went out with Terraform 0.15, which is very exciting. Huge shout out to Kristen, the Terraform core dev, who kind of really championed that project and did a lot of work on that. Thank you so much, Kristen. You're
Kristen is
awesome.
amazing.
Kristen is amazing. Kristen is one of my favorite people. But yeah, so Terraform Protocol 6 went out. And this was really trying to fix one of the issues that we first discovered in 2019, back when Terraform 0.12 was being released. At the time, we were moving from Terraform Protocol version 4 to Terraform Protocol version 5. And this was the first time we introduced gRPC. And more importantly, it was really locking down the type system of Terraform, but it was formalizing a bunch of things that had kind of like grown haphazardly in Terraform over the years, and coming up with properly designed orthogonal composable solutions to them. And while we were doing this, we discovered that provider developers had sometimes taken advantage of features that weren't meant to be features, as in like the way we built things allowed you to do something that we never intended you to do. And then provider developers found that, took advantage of it, and used it to build user experiences that were better user experiences than they otherwise would have been able to build. So that was part of what we struggled with the 0.12 upgrade was trying to understand and find and all these use cases and figure out how we were going to work around them or include them or redesign things to work better with them. And one of the major problems we had at the time was a problem we called blocks versus attributes. And that's because Terraform has two different types in it. And this is complicated. We're going to get really into the weeds here, and I'm really sorry. There's no better way to explain this issue. But Terraform's got two different types to it. It's got blocks and it's got attributes. And if you look at Terraform Plugin Go, or if you look at the protocol itself, you'll see that's all that's actually listed there. And then attributes themselves have types, and we're going to talk about that type system later. But so Terraform's protocol only thinks in blocks and attributes. And blocks are a collection of attributes. Like that's conceptually what a block is. Blocks contain attributes, and so you can think of them as like a box or a container type. The problem with blocks is that you can't set any flags on blocks. So flags are things like optional, computed, sensitive, things like that. And we've thought about putting flags on blocks before, but that creates a whole raft of problems in Terraform core. That's a problem. So we've got blocks and we've got attributes. Attributes are just individual fields. That's going to be like the name field or anything like that you would find within a block. And attributes have flags on them, but cannot contain other attributes. So for example, an attribute can be sensitive, computed, optional, all those things, but you can't have sub-attributes inside of an attribute. You can have blocks and you can have attributes inside them, and you can have blocks and you can have blocks inside the blocks. And that's about it. You following, Tracy? I'm seeing you do some mental math in your head. Oh, you're muted.
I got you.
Okay.
I had you lost me at sub, but then I came back on blocks. I'm here.
This is all incredibly abstract, and I'm really sorry.
No, you're fine.
This is probably not the ideal way to talk through this. I feel like I need to just kind of like turn to the whiteboard, but I did not prep for that. So we're doing this instead. So I promise we're almost done here. So the main difference as a practitioner between blocks and attributes, the only real way as a practitioner to tell whether you're using a block or an attribute is whether there's an equal sign or not. If it's assigned with an equal sign, you're using an attribute. If it's assigned without an equal sign, you're using a block. And that's it. That's the difference. You'll also see this with the confusion between for each and the for, I think it is. I forget what our looping constructs in Terraform and HCL are, but
yeah, you're using for to loop over the attributes.
It's a for each and dynamic, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, dynamic is
for each
used
is after. Yeah.
Yep. Dynamic is used with blocks. For each is used with attributes. As you can see, this is not the most intuitive user experience. We're kind of surfacing semantics that users don't know about or really even care about. And so we were struggling with this, and this really came to a head in 2019, as I said, with Terraform 0.12, because certain structural fields, like if you've got a network configuration and your compute instance is the one I always remember. And it's got like IP address in it and like where that IP interface is mounted on the machine and all of that stuff. That was implemented in a block under the hood, but the SDK never surfaced that. And blocks used to be implemented as lists of objects under the hood. And so you could set it to the empty list to say, I want none of these blocks defined on this resource. And so people were doing that. That was how you would remove a computed or optional field from a resource that had blocks on it. I really struggled there. So that was the issue there. And when we upgraded to 0.12, you couldn't do that anymore because they weren't lists of objects anymore. They were just blocks. They were implemented as blocks now, and blocks don't have the equal sign. Like that's their defining characteristic. So you couldn't treat them that way. We ended up working in a workaround that allowed it to sort of work the way it was for 0.12, but it wasn't a solid fix. So, and what I mean by a solid fix is it didn't resolve any of the underlying problems. It just kind of kept the status quo. I think it was a great workaround. So we had that problem and we were trying to figure out what to do about it. We've been talking about it for a while now. We've been working on it. And finally in 0.15, we shipped it. And what we ended up doing is attributes can now have attributes underneath them. Attributes can contain attributes themselves. And so what this means is you're able to define an attribute type that has attributes on it that are then themselves sensitive or optional or computed or things like that, which really means there are very rare circumstances you would need to reach for a block for at all. You can just use attributes for everything. And so we talked about this. We kind of worked it through all of the different complicated scenarios that are involved in this. And this is a really hard problem to talk about just because there's a bunch of different systems and complexity at play. So it was a fun time trying to figure out how we were going to discuss this internally. Because it was like there are like 6 different problems that are all kind of wrapped up in this one thing. So yeah, it's if you've ever seen, I think there's an SDK issue and I don't have it to hand. I'm sorry, I can search for it when I finally shut up. There's an SDK issue.
Did you have something to say, Tracy?
Oh no, I was just going to say I was waiting when he did that natural pause. I was just going to say in the chat I did place a link for those of you watching or maybe watching later. There's a link in the chat for if you want to know more about adders and blocks, attributes and blocks, and also there's a workaround. I'm so used to saying adders; it's just easy. And there's also a bit more information on the workaround in the chat as well. Okay. Sorry, Patty.
No, you're good. It actually gave me a moment to search for the issue, which I'm going to kind of finish doing right here for a second. Aha. It's issue 201 on the Terraform Plugin SDK.
All right.
This is all really hard to understand as like a concrete problem in how it surfaces for users, but one of the ways this shows up is, for example, 201, where a block was being marked sensitive, but you can't mark blocks sensitive. The SDK doesn't make a distinction between blocks and attributes, so you were labeling a resource as sensitive, and all of the subfields of it were showing up not as sensitive, and that's because the SDK didn't know how to map sensitive to the thing you were trying to mark sensitive because it can't be marked sensitive. And so it creates problems like this. And there's a whole long thread. Martin gives a great explanation of what's going on in there. You can see us kind of go back and forth and figure out what the issue is. We finally got the tools to solve things like this because now we're better able to surface what the protocol is being mapped to, and we're better able to surface API design patterns. We've got better tools to map to API design patterns, I guess is the way I want to say it. So we finally got that implemented in Terraform 0.15. We're now trying to figure out whether or not how we want to surface that to users, because Terraform Protocol version 6 is in fact, Terraform Protocol version 5 is forward compatible with Terraform Protocol version 6, is I believe how it's supposed to be phrased. I always think of it as backwards compatible, but that is not true. If you're using Terraform Protocol version 5, you can be seamlessly and transparently upgraded to Terraform Protocol version 6, without changing any of your code. However, Terraform that expects Terraform Protocol version 6 won't, or Terraform that expects Terraform Protocol version 5 won't know what to do with a provider that speaks only Terraform Protocol version 6. Does that all?
I wonder if it's possible to summarize here why we thought that we needed a new major version of the protocol, like why we needed to go to V6.
That is a very good point. Yes. So the idea was, how we implemented this is that when you have an attribute, it gains a new nested type property, and the nested type says, and I contain attributes of this type. The problem is that's returned during the get schema call. So Terraform says, hey, provider, what's your schema? And the provider says, hey, here's my schema coming back. And it's got this new property on it. However, Terraform protocol version that's compatible with only protocol version 5 does not know how to interpret that schema that came back if it includes the new nested attributes behavior. Like that, it doesn't know what to do about that. So in that case, if you were using that feature in your Terraform provider and somebody with an older version of Terraform downloaded it, they would get a Terraform like crash or error or bug. Like it wouldn't be a good user experience. Now, so we were like, okay, so if we bump the major version, then it will stop that version of Terraform from downloading that version of the provider altogether. It'll be like, nope, no compatible provider versions. I don't know how to talk to this provider, which is the user experience we wanted. So it's not like any of the existing functionality was breaking. It's just that new functionality was added that Terraform would not know what to do with. And so it would break Terraform, not your provider. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good explanation, because I think it reveals how actually we're using this major version of the protocol to kind of communicate the compatibility between Terraform and the provider, and to ask Terraform to download only certain versions of providers. So it's sort of used in this way to make visible certain versions of providers to Terraform. That's something that wasn't obvious to me when I kind of came into this. It has this kind of dual role. It's not just a kind of breaking feature change. It's also a way of finding the right provider to download within the Terraform provider discovery process.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to point out, because we also had kind of forgotten this. We were sitting there talking about the problem. We were like, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And someone was finally like, why don't we just bump the protocol and then it'll handle itself? And we're like, oh, right, we can do that. My former manager infamously once said 5 Terraform protocol versions should be enough for anyone. And it was like a month later that we were like in protocol version 6. So that was a good time. But yeah, I'm sorry, Katie. I'm in a fugue state here. Did I miss anything with that explanation, or was there?
No, you didn't. No, I mean, like, I just wanted to add to that Kristen's kind of statement of the problem, which is that there's this constellation that I must credit Kristen for this. There is a constellation of interconnected issues which resist classification in a single problem statement.
I need to say this out loud because I just typed it in our Slack channel where this thing is living. We need that on a shirt or a canvas.
Well, I think every Terraform team can relate to that sentiment. And as Patty described it, I also realized that, yeah, I mean, there's I think this is going to be a theme of today, that this is the kind of problem that once we've solved it, it will be invisible. Because I believe that this is the reason it's so hard to describe is that Terraform uses these concepts such as blocks and attributes and objects with attributes that are a little unfamiliar compared to how we think they should work. So it's pretty obvious to me that if you've got an object, if you've got attributes which can have, computed or sensitive on them, then if it's a sub attribute of an object, it should also be able to do that. That's kind of this kind of nested attribute, optional attribute concept is an obvious part of the language that I think will seem really, really obvious in hindsight. So we're solving difficult problems here that lead to simple user experience.
And I think that brings up a further complication of the issue that I will not spend too much time on. I just want to highlight very quickly, if that's okay. I said Terraform's got 2 types, right? Objects and attribute, or blocks and attributes. And then attributes have a type themselves. And that is true. And those types are the things you're probably familiar with, like objects, maps, strings, all of those things. and those are defined in Terraform by a library called CTI. It's a whole thing. I could do an entire like 2-hour long talk on the taxonomy of Terraform and like where all these things are. If you're using plugin Go, that's what TF types is for, is it defines those types and works with all of that. There is actually a barrier between those. Maps, objects, things like that, elements inside those, specific elements inside those can't have any flags on them. The entire type from TF types or CTI or whatever needs to have an attribute or a flag on it. So for example, individual keys on a object can't be sensitive, but individual attributes of an attribute can be sensitive, if that makes sense. And that was another thing where we were like trying to solve this problem. We had this third kind of type system over here that we were like, and how does this fit in? And so I think one of the takeaways for me was that we needed come up with some better documentation and better explanation of some of the systems that are working under providers, so that providers have a better sense of when to reach for each of these tools. Because, for example, you might want to reach for an object sometimes, or you might want to reach for an attribute with attributes inside of it, depending on what the needs of the things inside them are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. And also you've made me realize the correct vocabulary here, flags. We've got attributes, we've got objects, we've got flags, and flags are those properties on, can we call them properties? We're introducing another term here.
Well, what's great is you've got attributes in Terraform, and then you've got attributes of objects. And I'm just trying to talk about this as we were solving it, was like, okay, so attributes inside attribute, like, wait, object attributes are like attributes can have flags on them, like object attributes or attribute attributes. And it was
it's like our internal name problem. Like, so for those of you that don't know, I don't always push the button for us to go live. So today our lovely person to push the button was Katie. Not this Katie, another Katie, which also, if you look at the link that I popped in the chat for one of the issues, the person that introduced that one was another Katie. It's like our internal problem on how do you address something when they all have the same name and they're just different variants or different versions of what's going on. So that's how that's working in my brain. And I think that's how I'm going to compartmentalize it going forward.
I'm proud to work for a multi-Katie company. I think this is the first multi-Katie company I've worked for, which is pretty great. So Paddy, can we anticipate that blocks will just become a thing of the past now? Are blocks useless?
I don't think blocks are useless. I think there are some very specialized cases where they might make sense. But I think for the large part, most people that are using blocks today will end up using attributes at some point in the future. I don't know when that point in the future is, when that tipping point will be.
Because to be clear, as a provider developer, you can still keep using blocks in exactly the same way you've been using them. You don't have to change anything.
Yeah, if you're using plugin Go, you're going to be able to keep using blocks without changing anything. Nothing's going to change for you today. If you're using the SDK V1 or V2, then sorry, we're getting Slack messages. If you're using SDK V1 or V2, then I think you're going to be required to continue using blocks for a little while, because the way we mapped 0.12 onto the SDK and the way we kind of hid those changes in the SDK makes it really hard for us to kind of swap out blocks for attributes in that way in the underlying code. Just because we're at risk of running into the same problem we did with 0.12, where people are using things in an unexpected way and we don't know what all of those ways are. So it's a massive risk of breaking somebody's provider on them. And I'm just not sure that it's worth the benefit we get in return for that risk is worth it. So
if I'm a provider developer, should I just stop using blocks? Should I change to this new way of being?
If you're using Terraform Plugin Go, yes. I've been told to ask people to stop using blocks, especially if you have the ability.
We're getting loads of Slack messages right now saying stop using blocks.
Yes, everyone's like, stop using blocks. I've been offered to, somebody bribed me to say that you should not use blocks anymore. But yeah, if you've got the choice, if you've got the ability, you should stop using blocks. Honestly, probably yes, you should stop using blocks. If you're using blocks for a very specific reason and none of anything that I said today confused you and you were like, I understand exactly what he's talking about, okay, you might have a use case for blocks there, maybe. If you're not sure, you probably want an attribute. Unfortunately, SDK v1, v2 probably won't get the ability to use attributes because, again, just the upgrade path is difficult. All Plugin Go has the ability. We're shipping a Plugin Go release that has support for Protocol version 6, so you'll be able to use this new functionality. And any new stuff we build will be built on Plugin version 6, so that we can take advantage of this, and it will be the default there. But yeah. There are issues available on Terraform Plugin Mux and Terraform Plugin SDK for how you can start using Protocol version 6 available. It's issue 19 on Mux and issue 737 on the SDK. And so, yeah, weigh in there if you've got strong opinions on this or you want to talk about this more. But I think that's it for today. I think that's all we've got to talk about with that for today. Am I
Yeah, thank you, Paddy. Yeah, so the stage of development we're at is that we're just we've got it in Plugin Go, so you can use this new feature in Plugin Go, the V6 protocol, and we're currently just determining, making some decisions about how that will be incorporated into Plugin Mux and the SDK. So those issues that Paddy mentioned, which Tracy is just posting in the chat, are where those decisions are sort of being made. So now I'm going to update you on the rest of our repos. I'm going to give Paddy a brief break while I announce that we have created the Terraform plugin log repo. Now, in the previous office hours, in fact, I wasn't here for the previous one, so Paddy said something more about it then. The one before that,
whether he intended to or not.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'm sorry. It's funny because he was like, yeah, and so blah, 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 and logging and this and then that. And then like 20 minutes in, he went, we talked about this last time, didn't we? And I was like, I thought you wanted to.
I love talking about Terraform plugin log because it's really great. It's actually going to make loads of people's lives much easier, and it's going to be amazing. I'm not here to announce to you that we have a 1.0 release of Terraform plugin log, but we have a repo where it will live, and we started scaffolding it up and just getting all the kind of machinery in place. Since it's designed and since it is a relatively simple, I'm going to say at this stage, wrapper around HClog, we don't anticipate it will take a huge amount of time to kind of do any more design and implementation. It should be, we should be able to have something usable out in a reasonable amount of time. But that's the announcement for today. We have the repo. So that's just another one of the pieces of the Plugin Go ecosystem, and eventually the new framework. And you can also use it with the SDK. So now that Paddy's had a break, I'm going to ask him to talk more about our next kind of big interesting release, which is that we've got a v0.3.0 of Terraform Plugin Go. And this has loads of new features, and we've broken loads of things to improve them, and it's really exciting. So Paddy, please talk about that.
Absolutely. I love that. I just love like, yep, we've got a repo, and it's like, yep, go us. No, we clicked some buttons. It was good. No, that is there. I joke, but it is actually something that takes a little bit of work and buy-in from the company and things like that. And it does actually represent a large step forward of commitment. We've decided to solve this problem and set us up a place to solve the problem and all of that. More importantly, we do have a place for you to gather issues and suggestions and feature requests and things like that on it too. So please, by all means, open issues there. But actually what Katie asked me to talk about there, instead of just going off on my own tangent again, the Terraform Plugin Go 0.3.0. It's not out yet. It's coming soon, very soon. We're fixing some last minor bugs in it. But this is a big one. We've got a lot of stuff going on here. You're going to notice a lot of breaking changes. I'm actually looking at the changelog right now, and it is like half breaking changes notes. I promise it's not as intimidating as it sounds. The biggest pain point of it is probably going to be the TF types type system. That moved from being in the TF Proto V5 package to being a top level package of its own. And that's because we're sharing that code between TF Proto V5 and TF Proto V6. That is one of the things coming in version 0.3.0 of Terraform Plugin Go is a new TF Proto V6 package that has the protocol version 6 features we just talked about. So we've got that coming in. tftypes.newValue is going to become more reliable by breaking easier. And I know that sounds incredibly backwards, but previously you could pass in you could call tftypes.newValue, say this is a tftypes.string, and then pass in a number, and it'd be like, great, I've got a value here for you, no big deal. It would panic if you passed in a type that couldn't be assigned to any tftypes.type. I know I'm using the word type way too much. I don't know how to talk about type systems. It's really challenging. But so yeah, if you passed a Go type that isn't a valid Go type for any tftypes.type, it would panic. But if it was valid for any type, it didn't check that the type you were using for it matched, if that makes sense. So like you could pass in a string, you could say it was a string, pass in a number, and it'd be like, yeah, sure, this is fine. And everything would be cool right up until the moment where you tried to send that value back to Terraform. And then it would give you an error saying, hey, I don't know, this isn't a valid value. I don't know what to do with this. But by that point, you don't know where that value came from. That value's gone through entire layers of your code base at that point. We're down to literally encoding it to send it over the wire. That's really far from the error. And one of the things that we wanted to do was move where you get notified about errors closer to where the error actually happened. So we talked about it a lot. We kind of worked on how to solve this, and we decided that we were going to panic for types that if you passed in an invalid combination of type and value. If the combination itself wasn't valid, then we were going to panic. And this is scary. This is scary because it means that panics are going to be a lot more common. And so one of the things that we did was we added a tftypes.validate value. Yeah, validate value function that will return an error if tftypes.newValue is going to panic. Why didn't we just add an error return to tftypes.newValue? Well, because when you're composing multiple tftypes, when you're composing like an object or something, trying to create a tftypes.newValue to put in as a key is a lot easier if it does not return an error, if it just returns the value. And the other thing is, because we're going off the types of the values and not like the values of them, the risk of panicking really should be any kind of acceptance testing that you do, or any testing at all that exercises that code path should catch it. The only case where that's not true is if you've got an interface coming back from your API or something, which seems like a much more rare case. If the Go type can change, then the panic would surprise you. But otherwise, like literally any testing at all would catch this. And so we classified it as a programming error, not a runtime error. So new value ends up panicking to capture that usual case, and validate value is there for the rare case where you don't know what Go type you're passing in and you need a check to make sure that it's okay. So we did that. We removed some unnecessary types and stuff like that. I'm not going to list all of those out by regularly because the changelog's got notes on how to upgrade.
Paddy, sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
I wonder if it would be worth mentioning that we've been thinking about this idea of when to use panics and when to use errors, and we've actually written out a kind of design doc of how we think about that. Is that relevant to Plugin Go? Should we post that?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and share that. That sounds great to me, because that talks a lot more in depth about what I was just babbling about trying to.
Yeah, because I think that's a really interesting design point. In why would we have the separate validate function? And it'd be really interesting to see if anyone has any feedback on that, or just it's also got some great links to other perspectives. Like Martin Atkins has written an article on that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, please just interrupt me. I'm struggling so hard to talk about abstract concepts.
No, you're fine. I also posted a link to, Katie also shared with me a link. There's not a rendered changelog for version 0.3.0 yet, but the link that I posted will show you the diff. So that, along with what she's about to share with me, should kind of give you a general idea of what Patty's talking about right now.
I've got a gist that's a rendered version of the changelog that I'll put in Slack.
Oh, nice. I was hoping you'd rendered it somewhere.
All right, I've got those incoming.
So that's not an official changelog yet, but it's a rendered version of what's in the repo. We're using a changelog generator now, so we're not keeping the changelog rendered in the repo up to date. We render it right before we release. We're going to improve that process in the coming weeks, hopefully. So we talked about all of that. If you were passing in a float 32 to new value before, you can't do that anymore because there's no lossless way to convert between float 32 and big dot float, which is what our internal representation of number is. So we require you to do the lossy conversion yourself, so you can choose which lossy conversion is most appropriate for your use case, and you're not surprised when it ends up being lossy. So that's coming. I'm trying to think of any other breaking changes. The only other big breaking change I think that two other big breaking changes that need to be called out here. Attribute paths are now pointers, and do not the width methods on them no longer mutate it. So it's why it's a pointer is so that you can pass it right into diagnostics manually, or you can build it inline in a diagnostic without building it outside the diagnostic and then passing in a pointer to that value. And the width values no longer mutate it, so that it's easier to in recursive or functions that call into other functions. It's easier to kind of pass things in and use the right attribute path. We kind of took a pass at designing those so that they would be ergonomic for the way that people are expected to usually use them. The changelog's got more details about all of that. Upgrading should be pretty quick for that. I'm trying to think if there's any other stuff here. Primitive types now have a different Go type underneath them. The Go type for it is not exported, so you shouldn't be trying to assume things about the Go type behind them anyway. But if you were using equals or switch on them, that will no longer work. You're going to have to use .is, which is what was the recommended and supported way for using them, or for comparing different types. But yeah, so that's that. And then I'm going to call out some big features here, and I think that's it because I don't want to go through all these enhancements. The big features are that there's now a diff function for tf_types.values, which lets you surface what the difference between two values are. You'll also get walk and transform functions. Walk visits each element of a complex value and kind of gives you a walk through complex values, letting you call a function on each of them. And then transform is basically a walk that lets you modify sub-elements as you go through. So if you've got an object, a transform value will let you change a specific key on the object, for example, and then return the new value. And then finally, tf_types.values now have a type method. So you can call the type method and get the type of the value. We were trying to hide that from you before just because I don't know, giving people more information than they need is scary to me, but we found out that you do in fact need that. So we're going to give it to you. I think that's all of our big features and callouts for this one. Yeah, I can't see anything else worth calling out. I've got a giant block of text I'm trying to sort through live here, but I think that's everything. Katie, do you think of anything that I missed?
No, and I think I was just going to say, like, this is looking at the rendered changelog now. This is a huge release. We've made loads of changes, and I just want to call out the amazing work that Paddy has been doing on this to basically iterate along with the provider team, the teams and users of this. So the Kubernetes Alpha provider is using Plugin Go, and he's been working really closely to make sure that it just sort of works for them, and we're making all the right changes at this point. So we are still in breaking change land, but as you can hear, all of the changes are pretty positive things, and they're based on actual use of this library, which is really great. So thank you, Paddy, for opening lots and lots of huge PRs that I have to review, which I'm glad, because they have loads and loads of tests. So I can just read the tests, and so thank you for writing thousands of lines of tests in order to make sure that all this stuff works. So great job.
Poor Katie just wakes up at random days and is like, hey, Katie, here's a PR that's like 4,000 lines long with like a bunch of, God, I feel so bad about those. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I see, I mean, can you not just split this up into commits? You say, no, to explain why that would be possible, that's impossible, would take some time, because like all these things
We go through it and it's
Yeah.
like you're getting equals comparisons for values now, because I found out when writing walk and transform on values that I needed to be like, oh no, diff came from walk and transform, because to test walk and transform properly, I had to be able to surface that that two values were different in the way I expected. And I was like, well, if I'm going to write all this code anyway, you may as well give it to people. But then I've got to test diff. It's everything.
Then you're going to test the new thing you've made. But I'm really glad that this is so fully tested, and I think that's amazing work.
I feel like I forgot to pop the Terraform plugin framework repo in the chat at some point.
I'm just about to talk about that one.
Okay, I was like, did I miss? I don't remember.
I kept you on your toes, Tracy, because I've changed the order a bit during this talk. So
okay.
I have confused everyone. But I wanted to save that for last. So Terraform Plugin Go. Use it if you're using it. Give us feedback. We love feedback. Keep using Terraform plugin Mux as well. So so our main thread of development at the moment, as you know, is that we are developing a successor to the current SDK, and we're calling this the HCL2 native framework. So we've talked a lot about this before. What we've done now is, in the spirit of this sort of like get a public repo out as soon as possible, we made a repo called Terraform Plugin Framework. So this is where the implementation of the new framework will eventually be going, but also we've started to put design docs in there. So these are basically how part of our decision process for how we're designing this framework in order to make sure it meets everyone's needs, is that we need to have a sort of async process that shows people what decisions we're trying to make, what trade-offs those have, and then serves as a record of the decisions we made later. So for example, if you look at the panics and errors design document, which is still in PR but will be merged soon, you'll see our opinions on that and what trade-offs we're making each way, and when you think we think you should use one or the other. We've got a document about whether we think certain constructs should be structs or interfaces or a mix of both. And basically, we're just trying to be open about our design process, and we welcome feedback from anyone who has opinions on this. We have gathered a lot of feedback already, but it's great to just see kind of direct comments on this sort of stuff. And I feel like this is one of my favorite things about HashiCorp. It's this kind of like engagement with the open source community, and like we love doing this stuff in public. So it might be a little bit messy. We may be changing things. There are no promises for this repo, obviously. Please do not take anything there as law yet. But we're hoping that this is where eventually we're going to be sort of iterating. We have some prototypes as well, which we've internally been using to just sort of discuss some of the ideas that we're talking about in this repo, but they're definitely not for code to go out into the real world. So when we do have an actual prototype of the framework, this is where it'll be. So you may want to follow that repo. Anything else to say about that?
I think the only other thing to call out about that is that we did decide that we were going to develop the framework in this repository. We don't expect it to live in this repository for forever. When we are ready to commit to it and 1.0 it, I think we're going to move it to a different repository. But we will cross that bridge when it comes. And just to call out that if you're going to be following this repository and building things off of it, the same Terraform plugin Go disclaimers of version 0 of Semver apply here, where until we're ready to stand behind the interface fully, and we'll announce when that is, and it'll get a major version bump. Until that point, though, we do reserve the right to break things, as I've done in plugin Go with version 0.3, to build a better interface as we understand more about the problem. I think that was the only other thing worth calling out there. And if you've got feature requests, dreams, aspirations, things that really bother you about the current SDK, things like that, by all means, there are issues on that repo. We may close your issue out as there's nothing to do here, but it's really helpful for us to kind of have all of the design elements in one place like that. So if you feel the urge to open an issue there, by all means, let us know what's up and give us some information.
If you don't feel comfortable throwing an issue, as I've said multiple times, this particular team is very active on the Discuss forum to the point where they get the feed in their Slack channel. So I'm going to paste a link to that particular forum thread
Thank you,
in
Tracy.
the chat.
call.
No problem at all. Let's see. What else you got? Was that it? Oh, holy crap. Did we already talk almost an hour?
I was going to ask you questions and then I don't know. I forgot to talk about Terraform exec, but let's just see if anyone has any questions and whether we can just chill for a couple of minutes.
Did we just talk for an hour? Well, I took like half an hour to try and explain the difference between blocks and attributes.
I feel like we were still going really fast. I mean, we could have said way more.
I know I skipped so much.
We did.
A lot of
I'm
context.
proud. We have 12 minutes left. I can fill in at least 6 of those minutes, and then we can do the standard elongated goodbye.
Oh, I don't know if I want to do an elongated goodbye. That makes me nervous.
I'm Irish. We do the Irish goodbye, which is you just leave.
Just leave.
Until somebody notices.
Just press leave. I do want to talk about Terraform exec though.
Oh
Tracy,
yeah, come on.
Is that okay? Okay,
Yeah.
great. I meant to talk about this when we were talking about Terraform 0.15. So you may be aware that HashiCorp has a library called Terraform exec. This also happens to be maintained by the SDK team, although it's not actually part of the SDK. And in case you're not aware, this library is used by all sorts of uses in running Terraform, the binary, from your Go code. So if you've got code that's running Terraform, and if you would otherwise be using the command package from Go to do that, then please use Terraform exec. It's not quite at 1.0 yet, but it is stable-ish. We don't expect it to change a huge amount before then. But again, the similar guarantees apply to pre-1.0 libraries. So why I wanted to talk about this today is that Terraform exec has been part of this Terraform sort of quality framework that we've been developing within HashiCorp, and has allowed us to do lots of things like test the latest versions of Terraform as soon as they are committed into the main branch against all sorts of providers and combinations of configurations and combinations of flags used in the CLI. So not only is this library really useful if you want to be running Terraform, but it's also, I also wanted to call out that it's part of the way we're just kind of defining Terraform behavior more. So the Terraform exec tests are the fullest specification of the Terraform CLI behavior you'll find. So it's actually quite useful to be able to refer there to the combinations of flags you can have and what they do. There's a couple of things we needed to do to make sure it was compatible with Terraform 0.15. So if you're a user of Terraform exec, if you're importing that and you want your library to work with Terraform 0.15, we recommend you upgrade. It's been compatible for a couple of releases now. I forget which release exactly of Terraform exec is the last one. I think the last minor version will be pretty safe. So that's been out for a while. So if you're not sure, please upgrade Terraform exec to make sure all the users of Terraform 0.15 can use your library. Yeah, that's all I had to say about Terraform exec, I think.
Oops, Patty, you have anything on that?
I was just pulling up the changelog to see if I could find it quickly, but I'm not finding it quickly through scanning. But the only other thing I wanted to mention was I was reading the back scroll while we were sitting here on our Slack channel, back conversation behind this, the secret backstage of this event.
Tell them how to.
I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to touch back on just interesting trivia on that constellation of interconnected issues statement, which is one of the best sentences ever written. Really great job, Kristen, on that. I love that we keep referring to Terraform as a constellation of interconnected issues, which resist classification in a single problem statement, because if I remember correctly, I believe the original working name for Terraform was Constellation, which...
Ooh, I didn't know that.
I love mentioning parts of like Terraform's history from before it was Terraform. I love those. But anyway, I wanted to call out that fun anecdote. But that's it. That's all I had. Not related to exec at all. Sorry, Katie.
Haha, I found the tweet on it. It's a recent tweet, but Mitchell actually said something about that last year. That the project code name was Constellation. You know what? Always says stuff on Twitter. You gotta, I'm gonna pop that link in there just in case.
Well, I didn't know that. I've only been here for 2 years, so I'm young in HashiCorp.
I feel old, and he's older than I am at HashiCorp.
I was not here for that, for Constellation itself. I just happened to hear stories of it. I just love the lore of startups. It's so great. The things that get lost.
That's my first time
Yeah.
ever hearing of that. That is, I'm popping that in chat. All right. Let me see.
Yeah, I just saw a message from a Terraform core developer who will remain unnamed who said, I did not know that. So not
See,
even
you didn't know it either, did you? See?
Not even all the Terraform core developers know that.
And I'm the same age as I think that person. That's sheesh. All right.
I believe the TF exec for, by the way, is 0132 is the release number. I think that.
Thank you so much, Paddy. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say I deeply regret the fact that Terraform exec versions do not exactly track Terraform core versions. There was a time when they did. I think it was maybe 0.14, but I really wanted to release Terraform exec 0.15 and have it be Terraform core 0.15 compatible, but I just couldn't make enough breaking changes in time, so it didn't work.
I think that is Constellation is going to close us out and breaking changes. That is the theme of today. Breaking things easier, breaking changes in Constellation. DBC. All right. So I'm going to give my spiel. See, Patty had nothing for that one. That means I have time to give my spiel. Okay. So tomorrow, guess who you get to see again tomorrow? Hi, it's going to be me. So tomorrow I will be doing, we have HashiCorp Live North America. I will be pairing, so you all have seen me talk with the product delivery team before, either on office hours or HashiCorp Live. Well, I and Chloe, because Chloe did call me out in a previous office hours to pair with her on screen, we will be attempting tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. We're going to try to implement the Vault reference architecture in Terraform in one afternoon. If you hear screaming, right, Patty, when I look, it was either that or Nomad. So yeah, if you hear screaming, that's me tomorrow. Monday, we still have PepCAC Monday, so you get to grab some coffee and join the DAs. You'll probably see Kareem and Rosemary, if I'm not mistaken. That's at 9 a.m. Pacific and 12 noon Eastern. They're going to debug some things. Last week, Rosemary and I, last week, I think Rosemary and I debugged boundary issues. That was fun. And then on Wednesday, I believe the last, I mean, Katie, you can join us for that. I absolutely tomorrow join us.
I will. That sounds fascinating.
Patty heckled us last Friday with the provide. Well, he didn't heckle. It's a long story. So next Wednesday will be the last, I believe the last episode of Terraforming with Freeman. So please join them and give them all of the problems. And that will be at 9 a.m. Eastern. The next community office hours are on April 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, and they will be talking about Terraform 0.15. So please, all of you join. That's probably going to be Kareem and or Taylor. And if it's both of them, please give them all of the hard questions you can in the chat. And then shameless plug. So part of what you all know that I talk with them about is like not just the plugin, but like I use the scaffolding to try to build my own provider recently. And then we just debugged said provider last Friday on HashiCorp Live. We also have had a really good conversation at the previous office hours about all things, like the second half of that chat was about provider specific stuff, like building providers, best practices, that kinds of things. Please go back and look at those. Like I have the YouTube links saved to my computer because I plan on referring to all of those things. We actually learned, Patty even took notes at the HashiCorp Live, the last HashiCorp Live that we did for the dev.2 provider. So absolutely watch those. And if you still have questions, do go to the Discuss forum. Like I said, they are very, very active in the Discuss forum. So if you have questions, we also have a really pretty darn great community. So somebody will answer your question. But yeah, I think that's all I have. And we had like 3 minutes left. Oh, I'm getting better at this. All right. So we're going to do the I'll let you say goodbyes and then we're going to do the pause. So we actually have a professionally looking exit for YouTube. You're on mute, Patty.
Gonna like make faces or something at the
yeah,
pause.
just freeze. Just freeze.
So long, farewell.
All right, we've got a so long farewell. Is Patty going to do Auf Wiedersehen good night?
No, my German is not nearly good enough. Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
All right, and this will be my freeze frame bye. So hopefully I will see the majority of you all tomorrow. And thanks. Bye. Man, this thing has a really long lag, doesn't it? Hold on. I know this is going to be on YouTube. I actually don't care right now. You are doing great pauses, by the way.
Have you pressed the button?
Wait, almost. I'm going to press the button. Wait, wait, wait.